On November 3rd, 2025, Eby made a shocking announcement that has everyone asking, did Doug Ford just destroy Canada's relationship with America? What I'm about to show you reveals the biggest interprovincial crisis in Canadian history. Let's dive in. Subscribe right now, because what I'm about to reveal shows how one premier's ego costs every Canadian family thousands of dollars. You need to see this. Let me take you back to October 16th, 2025. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who calls himself Captain Canada, announced he was spending $75 million on an anti-tariff TV advertisement targeting Americans. Ford said, "We're going to repeat that message to every Republican district there is, right across the entire country." The ad featured former President Ronald Reagan from 1987 saying tariffs hurt American workers and consumers. On the surface, it seemed smart using a Republican icon to criticize Trump's tariff policies. But here's where it went catastrophically wrong. The ad aired during the first two games of the World Series watched by millions of Americans. And Donald Trump. He exploded. Canada cheated and got caught. They fraudulently took a big buy ad saying that Ronald Reagan did not like tariffs, when actually he loved tariffs for our country. Trump didn't just complain, he took action. On October 24th, 2025, he announced, "I am increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now." And it gets worse. Trump canceled all trade negotiations with Canada. He told Prime Minister Mark Carney, "I wouldn't be meeting with you for a while." Let's do the math on what Ford's ego just cost Canadians. Canada exports $420 billion to the US annually. 10% additional tariff equals $42 billion in extra costs. Softwood lumber already facing 45.16% combined tariff. Trade talks, frozen no relief coming. Thousands of jobs at risk in BC forestry alone. Doug Ford spent $75 million to feel like a tough guy. And it cost Canada's economy billions. Mission accomplished? I don't think so. Hit that like button because we're about to dive into crucial details about how Eby tried to clean up Ford's mess and the impossible position he was put in. Before Ford's disaster, BC Premier David Eby had his own anti-tariff ad campaign ready to launch. It was scheduled for November 2025, targeting American audiences with a simple message. The current 50% combined duties and tariffs mean Canadian softwood lumber faces more import fees than Russian fiber products. Eby's ads were going to be digital a fraction of Ontario's $75 million budget. They were supposed to show Americans that tariffs on Canadian lumber hurt them, not us, by making home construction more expensive. Then came Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Federal Minister Dominic LeBlanc flew to Vancouver for an emergency meeting with Eby. And what happened in that room changed everything. One of my commitments to the federal government was that if they came to the table with us, if they sat with us, that we would work with them on communications, on strategy, Eby said. Ottawa begged Eby to cancel his ads. Because, after Ford's disaster, they couldn't risk another premier poking the bear. Think about the position Eby was in. Option 1. Run the ads. Defend BC's forestry industry, but risk another tariff increase from Trump. Option 2. Cancel the ads, look weak. Abandon BC workers, but help federal negotiations. Option 3. Run smaller, quieter ads that might not trigger Trump, but probably would anyway. What would you do? Protect your province or protect the country? It's an impossible decision. On November 3rd, 2025, just hours after meeting with federal officials, Eby made the announcement. "I knew that it was a source of anxiety for many people, including potentially the federal government. Given the reaction to the Ontario tariffs," Eby said, notice what he didn't say. He didn't say Ottawa asked him to cancel the ads. He said he made the decision himself. Why? Because Eby is smart enough not to throw the federal government under the bus publicly. But here's what makes Aby's decision so frustrating. In exchange for canceling the ads, he asked Ottawa for $1.20 billion bailout for BC forestry. 2. Employment insurance reform for laid-off workers. 3. Faster access to the $700 million liquidity fund announced in August. 4. A seat at future U.S. trade negotiations. 5. A task force to support softwood lumber sector. While he did not secure any measurable concessions at the meetings, Eby said he put forth several proposals, Eby got nothing concrete, just vague promises and a commitment to work together. He gave up his leverage, his ad campaign, for basically nothing. Here's what came out after Ford pulled the ad. Prime Minister Mark Carney admitted that he warned Ford not to run the ad, but Ford ignored him. Ford said on Monday that Carney called him twice from his trip to Asia asking him to pull the ad. But Ford declined until days later after it had run during the first 2 games of the World Series. And then it got worse. On November 2, 2025, Prime Minister Carney had to publicly apologize to Donald Trump for Ontario's ad. Carney said the ad was not something I would have done. Think about that. The Prime Minister of Canada apologizing to Donald Trump for something a provincial premier did without federal approval. That's humiliating on the world stage. And how did Ford respond to all this chaos? With pride. Mission accomplished, Ford said. They're talking about it in the US, and they weren't talking about it before I put the ad on. Before we wrap up, comment below with your answer. Who's more to blame, Doug Ford for running the ad, or Mark Carney for apologizing to Trump? Let me know your thoughts. Let me explain why Eby is going crazy over this. BC's forestry industry is in crisis. 194,040 workers employed in forestry across Canada. BC is the highest cost forestry jurisdiction in North America. Current tariff, 45.16%, 35% duty plus 10% Trump tariff. 2024, BC harvested only half of annual allowable cut. Multiple mills closing or reducing shifts. BC Council of Forest Industries President Kim Hockstad to give companies a fighting chance to stay open. We need a coordinated federal-provincial work plan. Eby's ads were supposed to put pressure on Trump to reduce softwood lumber tariffs by showing Americans that they pay the price through higher home construction costs. He hoped to build public support for tariff relief, but Ford's reckless ad destroyed that strategy. Now, if Eby runs ANY ads, Trump will see it as another Canadian attack. The door is closed. Ontario has a diversified economy, manufacturing, finance, tech. If Trump raises tariffs 10%, Ontario hurts but survives. But BC is dependent on forestry and natural resources. Those extra tariffs could mean thousands of permanent job losses. So yeah, Eby has every right to be furious. Ford played politics with Ontario's money, and BC workers are paying the price. This story isn't just about 2 premiers and their egos. It's about the cost of political grandstanding. Doug Ford wanted to look tough on Trump, and now Canada-US trade talks are frozen. Tariffs are 10% higher than before. BC forestry workers are losing jobs. Federal-provincial relations are damaged. Trump has Canada over a barrel. The people who suffer aren't Ford or Eby, they'll be fine. It's the mill workers in BC, the families in forestry towns, the Canadian businesses paying 45% tariffs while competing with Russia paying less. Can this be fixed? Maybe. LeBlanc committed that when trade negotiations resume, BC will be buckled up and involved. But those negotiations might not resume until after Trump extracts maximum concessions. The lesson: when dealing with Donald Trump, you need a unified strategy. Federal and provincial governments working together, not against each other. Because when premiers go roguelike, Ford did one pays the price. Like this video if you're frustrated with Ford's mistake. Subscribe for updates as this trade war unfolds. Share this with anyone who thinks premiers should stick to their lane and let Ottawa handle foreign policy. And comment, do you support Eby's decision to cancel the ads? Or should he have run them anyway and stood up to Trump? I'm reading every comment. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.